About 1 year ago, I started to hear God call me in a deeper way. I was still employed at the time. I had a great job for a growing organization, 6-figure salary, a team working underneath me. On the surface, I thought I had all that I wanted, but there was a problem. You see, we have this quiet place in our heart, this interior place where God speaks to us. And it's where He tells us who He is. It's where He helps us understand who we are and what we're called to. And over time, the anxieties and stress of life can start to drown that voice out. You know, we get to college and we're supposed to have our career picked out. We're supposed to have our whole life planned at the age of 21. We get married and we start having kids and we got to start paying bills, and all of this childlike awe and wonder that we had growing up, all the adventurous spirit, the trust, it all disappears. And it can stifle that still small voice of God, that call to be a creator just like Him. And it's not a childish dream. It's not something that should be stuffed down and ignored. But for a long time, I did ignore that. For a long time, I tried to move past it, tried to tell myself that the responsible thing to do as a father of 4 with 1 income for our family was to stifle that voice of creativity and artistic pursuit. A year ago, I decided that just wasn't going to work anymore. No matter how much I've tried to ignore that calling, no matter how much I've tried to stuff it down, it just keeps coming back. Because when I'm quiet, when I go to that place in my secret heart, when I spend time in prayer listening to God, that's what I hear from Him. This is what I've called you to. This is how I've created you. So in today's video, my hope is to share about what this past year has been like for me, so that it can be an inspiration to you in your own creative calling. Whether that's to start a business, whether it's to do your art, or maybe you just want to do something crazy like get a farm and grow some corn. I don't know, but whatever it is, I just hope that this video can help you find clarity so you can return to that childlike wonder and awe and go on this adventure with God. But first, let's get some more coffee. Cheers. Now, before we talk about what happened this last year, I want to give a little bit of context before I jump into that, because I think it's important to know where I came from. And what I don't want to happen is to get on here and for you to think to live out your creative calling, you have to work for yourself. You have to quit your job, or you have to be self-employed. That very well could be the case. You might be in a job that you're not supposed to be in, and maybe it's time for you to move on. You might be called to start a new business. It could also be the case that you're still early in the process. And I've talked about this in other videos. There are phases to the creative calling, and it's very important that you understand where you are in the journey so that you can make decisions and that you can take steps in wisdom and in line with where God has you. There have been several instances over the last 10 to 15 years where I have made an attempt to follow God's creative call, but there have been major obstacles in my way. And I want to share 3 lessons that I've learned along the way, because I think these are going to help you in whatever your context is, whether you're just starting out or whether you're a few steps down that path. So let's discuss those 3 lessons now. Number 1, society is Neil's father. If you've ever seen the movie The Dead Poets Society, there's a character in that movie named Neil. And Neil is a high school student, and he feels a call to the arts. He wants to be an actor.
For the first time in my whole life, I know what I want to do.
And Neil is participating in this class with a professor who's played by Robin Williams. And that class that Neil has taken is only bringing out this creativity and this call to the arts even more. But the problem is Neil's father wants him to go to an Ivy League school, get a good degree, and become a doctor. And there comes a scene where Neil's father sits him down and he looks at him and he says, "Enough of the games. You're going to Harvard and you're going to become a doctor, whether you like it or not."
You don't understand, Neil. You have opportunities that I never even dreamt of, and I am not going to let you waste them.
I've got to tell you what I feel.
I've been so worried
What?
about...
Tell me what you feel.
It's tragic. I won't spoil the rest of the movie if you haven't seen it. And it's really a microcosm of what we face as creative people in our culture today. For those of us with a creative call from God, you and me, we are Neil, okay? And society is Neil's father, unfortunately. That is what we are up against. And I experienced this firsthand as a college student. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I couldn't figure out a major. I talked to a number of career counselors, and they all gave me a list of jobs that I would probably enjoy and probably be good at, but I wanted nothing to do with any of them. As evidence of this, here's a video of me as a college student with my band rapping on stage when I probably should have been studying for classes. Nobody is going to sit you down and say, you know what, you've got a creative gift. You look like you might be called to the arts. You should forget a 4-year degree. You should forget the typical sort of career ladder that people want to climb. You should do that. You should put your focus and your energy on that and pursue that, because that's what's going to be best for you. You're not going to hear that very often. If you do, you're very fortunate, because that is not the overwhelming message that we get from society and the people around us, unfortunately. I wish I would have understood that earlier in my career path. At least I would have understood the dynamic and what I was up against. And I would have had more self-confidence and self-awareness to say, you know what, this is what I want to do. This is who I am. This is how God made me. And I'm going to pursue something that's true to that. Maybe that's college, but maybe that's not college. Maybe that doesn't mean going into loads of debt and taking on some degree that I care nothing about, that I want nothing to do with. Maybe I would pursue a different path. So number 2, you must operate from a place of peace. So I left college and I didn't have the sort of momentum coming out of college to know who I was and what I wanted to pursue. So I was not living out my authentic calling. I was a blocked artist. I was suppressing the gift. And there are consequences to that when that happens. There is woundedness that comes from that. When that part of yourself, when that interior calling is not allowed to flourish, when it's not encouraged, it can cause a lot of problems. And so I took a lot of that woundedness and confusion and resentment into my adult life, into my marriage, into the early days of my working career as I was trying to navigate being a father, being a husband, trying to be a good Christian and be a provider and protector, provide security and stability for my family. And that was spilling over into my marriage, into my relationship with God. And it was building up over time. And so about 5 years into my career, I had started to learn this skill of videography. And I had some opportunities open up that were really good opportunities in the music video industry, working with some record labels and doing music videos for some pretty big artists. And so I decided to make the leap, my first attempt of making the leap into self-employment and full-time creative work. Here's another video from the archives of some behind-the-scenes footage of me directing a music video for Owl City. And yes, that shirt might look familiar. On paper, it actually went pretty well. I had some success. I did some really great work. But the reality was, because I was not operating from a place of wholeness and peace and just prayerful discernment of what God was calling me to, there was a lot of bad fruit coming from it. We know that the scripture tells us we can judge a tree by its fruits, right? We can judge things by whether or not they're producing good fruit or bad fruit. My spiritual life was getting worse. I was moving further away from God. It was putting stress on my marriage. It was creating tension and strain with my wife, the most important person in my life. And as I was having kids and I was trying to grow my career, I was burning out. It was just not leading to a place of good fruit. And that's because I was not operating from a place of peace. Okay, so if you recognize some of this in yourself, if you maybe are dealing with some lack of peace, maybe you're moving further away from God, or you're going through a hard spiritual season, it's very important, even if you hear this call from God, even if you feel very convinced, it's extremely important for you to get to a place of peace and contentment with God before you pursue that calling. Okay, and lesson number 3, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. All right, so after I got through that sort of tumultuous season where I made my first attempt at following God's creative call, there was a little bit of trauma. Okay, there was a little bit of PTSD for me and my wife as we sort of put the pieces back together. Although it was really good for me to take this time to step back and sort of reorient myself, the mistake I made was I thought that because I'd had this negative experience, because I'd had this failure, that the creative calling from God was bad and needed to be thrown out. I thought, okay, I can't trust this creative part of me. I can't trust this artistic desire that I have. I need to just get back on the saddle, go get a job, do the right thing, be a responsible father. And there I was, sort of back to suppressing this gift and this calling that I had. Now that worked for a little bit. Okay, we can ignore that call for a while and we can do everything we can to shut that voice up. But before long, it's going to start to poke its head out again. It's going to start to emerge. Now, the good thing was this time around, I had sought out healing. I had sought to find some peace within myself and some contentment. So a few years later, after I'd been sort of working a couple different jobs that, surprise, surprise, weren't really working out, I got to the point where I started to sort of rediscover this creative part of myself, this artist, and it started to reemerge. And God started to speak in a very clear way, and he started to open up my heart again to creating and reminding me that he had given me these gifts and that he had made me an artist, and these desires started to resurface. And I began feeling this call back to creativity, back to making things again. And I wasn't sure exactly what that was going to look like, but I started to feel this sense, and that sense got stronger and stronger. And that brings us to this last year and what God has done during that time, and which is what we'll talk about next. All right, we're almost out of coffee, so let's bring this home. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, about a year ago, I was still in my full-time job. It was what I thought was a long-term dream job. The work that I was doing was reaching hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and I thought I was going to be there for a long time. But a couple things started to happen. The first thing that happened was I attended a conference, and at this conference, there were Christian content creators from around the country that came together for a weekend of fellowship, prayer, talks, keynote speakers. But I saw this happening, and I just felt very much at home in this community of content creators. And it was there that God started to plant the seed for this YouTube channel. So I started creating some videos on the side. I was still working on my job. It was a nice creative outlet. It wasn't getting a ton of views, and I was just sort of sharing general reflections on hearing God's voice and how I was doing that as a father and husband of 4 children. But then the second thing started to happen, and this was a little bit more unexpected and surprising. Things started to go south at work. And to make a long story short, I'll just say there was some unfortunate circumstances that started to unfold that were very much affecting my peace and causing great anxiety and stress for me. And they seemed like they were a bit beyond my control. And as this started to happen, I started questioning whether or not this job really was the long-term fit that I thought it was. And got the sense I should start thinking about what was going to be next. But I didn't have to think long about that, because a couple months later, that decision was made for me. And on Easter Monday of 2025, I was let go from my full-time employer. And that left me in a very precarious position. Here I was in what I had thought had been my dream job, very secure and fulfilling job, was now done. It was over. And I was kind of in this stranded place. And I was confused, and I was frustrated with God. And I went to God in prayer, and I said, "What is going on, God? Like, I've been trying so hard over the last 10 years of my career to do what's right. I've been trying to pursue my creative calling, have crashed and burned. I then got back on the horse and took a full-time job and started building this marketing career, got this amazing job for this amazing organization that was paying me a lot of money and doing great work with an incredible team. And here I am once again, stranded, confused, striking out. I can't figure this out. What are you doing?" And then I got this idea. Maybe I should go make a YouTube video about it. Maybe I should start to talk about this journey on my YouTube channel. And so it was about maybe a week after I got laid off, and I was still standing in the rubble of this failed job situation. I grabbed my camera and went in my backyard, and I started making this video called "Are You Running from God's Creative Calling?" And when I say, "Are you running from God's creative calling?" I was really talking to myself, because I had been the one running from God's creative calling for a long time. And I can look back on the last 20 years of my career, back to college. I could blame other people. I could point fingers at society, at Neil's father, at my spouse, at my family. I could point the finger at everybody around me as to why
I wasn't living out my creative calling. But the truth was, it was on me. I was running from God's creative calling. I was not stepping fully into it with courage and boldness and confidence. And it was time for that to stop. So I put this video out. And at the time, my channel had a couple hundred subscribers. A few people were watching. And I put that video out, and the views started to climb. First, 1,000. So, oh, I've never had a video get 1,000 views yet. That's nice. And then 3,000. And then 10,000. And then 50,000. And as the video went viral and took off, the comments started pouring in. The subscribers started exploding. And now the video's got almost 100,000 views. That video, Are You Running from God's Creative Calling, that I made out of frustration after getting laid off, has kickstarted the growth of this YouTube channel. It really has been the driver of what is now a growing YouTube channel and a viable business opportunity for myself as a creator and an artist. So I could see over the last year when God planted that seed at the Content Creators Conference and inspired me to start the YouTube channel, and then seeing the situation at work unfold and seeing that happen, and as confusing, as challenging as it was, I realized that God had been preparing me for this moment. He was clearing the way for this YouTube channel, for me to finally have the space to invest the time and the creative energy into this content creation. God has been doing something new in this last year, and it's just been incredible to see this whole story, this whole sort of messy, broken path that I've been on, to see God take the pieces of that and then now put something together that's so beautiful and so in line with who I am, and taking that story and inspiring others around the world, inspiring other content creators and Christian artists and dreamers and entrepreneurs to step into their calling fully. And that really has become my mission. It's become what I'm talking about on this channel. It's become what I want to dedicate my life to and my gifting to, is inspiring other people to take that same step into God's creative calling fully. Like Dostoevsky said, beauty will save the world. And I think Christian content creators have an opportunity to get on these platforms like YouTube and to share their gifts and to share their art and to share what's beautiful about God with the world and really save the world. There's a great opportunity. And we as a community, we as a society, as a church, we need to be supporting those Christian content creators. We need to be supporting the arts and helping people with a gifting, young people and people who are trying to figure out their career path and navigate how to provide for their families and how to be faithful and how to be responsible, helping them and supporting them and inspiring them to use their gifts for God's glory and to serve others. And that's what I want this YouTube channel to be. I want it to be a resource for you in your own journey, wherever you're at. If you're just starting out, if you're a dad like me who's in a job that you're not happy with, if you're someone who has tried and failed and has been toiling and trying to make this work, and you're confused, or you're in that place of humiliation or formation and training, and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, I want this channel to be hope for you. I'm really aiming just to be an example, to be a witness as I step out into the deep water, as I take that step of faith into this calling as a father, as a husband with 4 kids and the sole provider for my family, and seeing God work. I hope that I can share that in real time and have it be an example and a witness to you as you attempt to do the same thing wherever you're at in that journey. So that's my prayer for you. That's my hope for you. That's why I'm making these videos. I hope that you'll continue to walk with me on this journey towards creative calling. If you want to go deeper, there's a link to my Substack account in the description below. You can check that out. My hope is that the Substack channel can be a place where we go deeper, where I share a bit more behind the scenes on how I'm doing this in real time. I'm actually going to do a follow-up video to this one on my Substack account for the paid members to talk about how I'm doing this, how I'm monetizing and building this one-person business, building something viable that will support and provide for me and my family into the future, and all the challenges that I'm facing and the decisions that I'm making to overcome those challenges. So if you're interested in that, the link is in the description. I encourage you to check it out. But most of all, I'm just happy you're here. I'm going to continue to make these videos. I'm going to continue to invest in this channel. and to continue to step into that calling that God has called me into, to hopefully bless you as well. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next video.